welcome to the first episode of the In Gains We Trust podcast. I'm your co-host, BowTiedOx.
And I'm your other co-host, Mikey from Gain Trust.
If you're not familiar with who we are, first of all, how did you even find this? But whatever. I am BowTiedOx, a internet niche micro celebrity on Twitter. I am the writer of the Strong as an Ox Substack, which, humble but not humble flex, is the number one ranked fitness Substack. So, yeah, that's kind of cool.
And I'm Mikey.
Hi, Mikey. What do you do, Mikey?
Yeah, I'm an aspiring. I am aspiring to have the number one fitness Discord, and as of right now, it is the number one in terms of content and in terms of quality and what you can get from it. But it is not there in terms of numbers. But we're here to change that.
Do they have a leaderboard?
They not technically a leaderboard, but I know the big ones, the big accounts, and they're not impressive. They don't do anything close to what we do. If you're listening, those other accounts, joking.
I'm like,
but
I'm very competitive on like the Substack one. I'm like, okay, got to keep it. Like,
am I still number one?
Yeah.
Is there anybody that's close to you?
Not really. I'm like one of the first fitness Substacks though, so I got kind of lucky with that. But
you know what the funny thing is? When sometimes you interact with me or you like something of mine or whatever on Substack, and I hover over your name and it says, I think it says like tens of thousands of subscribers. No, but paid subscribers. I think it says like you hover over your name and it actually has like the accolade, like tens of thousands of people are subscribed to this person. I'm like, my mind just blows when I see that. It's crazy.
Nuts. It's nuts. I actually have more subscribers than Twitter followers, which is kind of cool. But
that is cool.
Enough of me not so humbly flexing. So if you're familiar with us, which you should be, I'm guessing you are, we're bringing you this podcast because, well, we're not just two American white guys that just decided we want to do a podcast like every other American white guy. I guess now we are, but we, me and Mikey have a very, very similar, near identical outlook on kind of our philosophies of, just kind of content and fitness in general. We strive for this unobtainable goal to be the very best that no one ever was. But all jokes aside, we both place this premium on like just quality content and really a bunch of nuance and just bringing people what is the truth and what actually works without some type of hidden agenda. Because you see all the time, like people will take extreme positions, but then they just so happen to have a book that, addresses this extreme circumstance. So that's and that's very popular in the industry. So we're starting this it's going to be entertaining. At least we think we're hilarious.
As long as it entertains me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if no one watches this, I'm having fun. But we're trying to just really, we already do. He does the video in his Discord extremely well. I'm an okay writer, and it's great. But this allows a better medium to really do our bread and butter, which is kind of explain these things in a really critical thinking, common sense way with the nuance kind of required in an industry that's just so full of dogma. So you want to.
You said something real quick, just to cut you off. You said, I'm an okay writer, and we all know that, you're underselling it. And I just want to expand on that because it definitely leads into what we're doing here. You're actually a great writer. And the reason you're a great writer is because you are clear and you deliver information that people connect with while there's a personality behind it. And it makes people feel smarter by reading you. And the reason why I think it's such a logical conclusion to do something like a podcast is because people want more of that in a different medium, and I think that we could deliver that. I think you can deliver that, and I think that you have a lot more to say. And being able to deliver it in this medium, I think, will be a fun challenge.
Well, we've always said, I've always made the joke because I don't think people quite understand how often and how long we talk on the phone a week. Hours a day, often hours a day. And kind of why we're doing this was we were like, man, this was such a just great conversation. And it was so productive. Why aren't we
That should have been a
recording this? Yeah.
podcast.
Why aren't we
Yeah.
recording this? It's like, I didn't even really want to do a podcast, but at this point, it just makes sense because
Yeah.
it's kind of like, if I'm a good writer, like explaining it in words, it's better. But I'm just looking forward to this. It's going to be fun. But enough of this. Let's kind of give the people who don't know like your background, and then I'll give them mine, so they kind of.
Okay. Yeah. So with me, I started off really with, I guess you could say, wrestling. I started wrestling in high school. There's nothing to really. Well, I'll put it this way. I When I went to school in New Jersey, there were a couple places on the in the country in the U.S. that were known for their really good wrestlers, and it was like you had Pennsylvania, you had Iowa, and then you had New Jersey, which is like weird, really weird to me, to because New Jersey you don't think of like elite athletes or whatever, but it's a very densely populated state. It's actually the most densely populated state, so it kind of explains there's a lot of entropy happening in the small area, which makes it this competitive scene. And we also have the influence of being close to New York City. So we're talking about being, and it's sandwiched between New York City and Philadelphia. So we're sandwiched between these two metropolitan hubs. And so without knowing it, without realizing it, I was born in the background, in the backyard of some of where the greatest athletes of all time would be. And for those of you who follow, Olympic wrestling or whatever, and if you know who Jordan Burroughs is, he's known as the greatest of all time wrestler. But Cal Sanderson, if I get that name wrong, I think it's Cal Sanderson. He was known as the greatest of all time, but Jordan Burroughs came through, and he's around my age. He's in his 30s, and he came through, and he just kind of he just tore, got all the gold medals for years and years and years. And I went to we grew up in the same area, and so all of this is really just to say that um, in my life in wrestling in high school and college, I was really exposed to some of the greatest wrestlers that there ever was, and it was an obsession of mine. I wanted to do it at the college level, and I wanted to do it, like, even beyond that. And so what led me really to where I am now is that when that ended, there's a really hole there for me, for what to do, like what can I do. And really the gym just filled that gap for me. And and so it just became this thing that took the place of sports for me. And I've been lifting weights consistently now for 15, actually 16 years. And a lot of people, when they say like, oh, I've been lifting for so many years or whatever, they really mean like on again, off again, across a long period of time. No, I'm saying that for the last 15 years I've really not missed like 3 days in a row. So anyway, I've
Do
been at
you
it for a long time. Yeah, go
do
ahead.
you know how old I was 16 years
Yeah.
ago?
Yeah, you were like,
I
what,
was
you're
in
like
fourth
4?
grade. I was 10.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I graduated in '07.
I'm not gonna exactly say because I'm a non
Yeah.
and I like to
No,
keep it a
no,
little
for sure, for
mysterious, but
sure.
it was almost a decade after that. So
Yeah, so Ox and I, we have a little bit of an age gap, but luckily I'm really immature and he's mature.
I
Well, kind of.
I forget too. Like it's
So,
like I always think you're my age, and then I mean we'll get a little sus here. You don't look it. You look
yeah, yeah.
like a honestly like you look my age. You look
I know.
27,
I get that all the time.
26. But yeah, I can relate to that a lot because my story is a little bit. We've talked about. I want to do an episode kind of on the origins of this a little more, but mine started out. Well, I played sports, but I don't count that in my like lifting experience. So played sports entire life. Um, got injured and then kind of just turned to, just really bad habits, smoking a bunch of pot, drinking a bunch, just all that. And then just slowly around 17, 18 years old, just was not, which granted, like I will say I was overweight, but pretty lucky that I have pretty good genetics. I wasn't like obese. But I was very insecure about it because I was always an athlete. So very insecure about it and all these habits. And then just one day, just panic attacks, anxiety, all of this stuff. And then one day I just decided, I was just like, dude, like I need to fix my life. And just to me, the logical step was like, I'm just going to go to the gym. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where it all started. And then 6 months after that, I wasn't even the same person.
We
No,
have that in common, actually.
it's like no issues anymore. No anxiety medication, anything. And then
Yeah.
and then I did something that's kind of funny. And like now I would, it's whatever, but like now I was like, come on, dude. Like a year into lifting, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be a personal trainer. I know everything. The Dunning Kruger. I was like, I
The
know everything. I
Dunning-Kruger,
did
yeah.
not know anything, but that's kind of around 18, 19, became a personal trainer. Did that thing for a couple years while, really building a good base. Granted, like looking back, my training was atrocious. It worked, put on good muscle and all that, but like when we talk about like how you can do it more intelligently and like dare I say optimal, I was nowhere near. But that kind of highlights the point of more important than anything is just actually getting there and doing it because I did get results. But
You had the
then
confidence there.
kind of as my life got back on track, then around 19, 20, it was okay. I want to do something more like in life, whatever. So I've always had this dream and a bunch of influences. I was like, I want to do some type of special operations. So after getting told no by a bunch of recruiters about everything, I've always, when I was a kid growing up, I had like my bed set. My bed theme was like Army Ranger. So yeah, joined the Army at the crisp age of 20. And yeah, go in, do the thing, go through basic training, airborne school, go to RASP, pass, become an Army Ranger. And that's really where my education and fitness just exponentially jumps. And it wasn't just
Why was that? Why was that? Was it because you looked into it, or was that a good environment for you to learn?
so I was always like, so I'm like the poster child of ADHD. So I hyperfixate on things I'm passionate about. So I've always hyperfixated on like fitness and especially bodybuilding. But there it became you had to be very intentional, like with performance, because it's not just lifting weights and looking good. It is, you need to be strong, you need to be fast, you need to be, a good athlete across multiple disciplines. Um, so it forced me to really like learn and hone into just becoming a good athlete and just really and like I've always had the obsessions too, but like how to take it to the next level. One, because quite literally it's life or death. Like that's kind of a good motivation when being at an elite level of fitness or not is can literally be you or your buddies getting hurt or killed.
Hmm.
And then we also had coaches, full-time strength and condition coaches that coached, pro and D1 level. So I got to pick their brains because I was still a gym rat. Like
Hmm.
even though Rangers are gym rats, I was a gym rat in a
Right.
place of gym rats. So I just got like this free education from elite coaches and then really got to like test and put everything to theory and really maximize athletics. So as that went on, it was great. I got to a point where I was, they have like standards. You got to be able to do 5 mile under 40 minutes, all these push-ups and all this. So I got to a point where I was pretty comfortable just maintaining like at a very good level. And that's whenever bodybuilding creeped back in. And then, yeah, it just went, the obsession took a whole different level because I had more of a background and a more deeper, broader understanding. And then more of the maturity and discipline too to really attack it. So then bodybuilding, a few years in really starts taking over again. And then I made the decision, okay, cool, I've done this. It would have been 6 years. Well, my contract was for a total because I reenlisted for 6 years. And as I was reaching the end of that second contract, it just bodybuilding was like, cool, this is what I'm going to do. Because I always saw bodybuilding when I started, whenever I was kind of lost in life, it's like a vehicle in life. It's like, cool, if I really just get really good at this, like I can make it in life, which is kind of crazy in
Yeah.
hindsight. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
cool, that's how it worked. But Yeah, I started, around 22, 20 or 23, getting coached by some of the best bodybuilding coaches there is, and really just taking it to the next level. And so I guess in short, from then till now, it's just been this obsession of bodybuilding and just and then fitness in general. And then I'm interested in a lot of other aspects of it. Like you can call it kind of bio. I'm not like a huge biohacker, but like biohacking and how to just really use the tools of the body to get better outputs in life. So
Yeah.
it was like it was not a formal education, but it was, I'll be damned if it wasn't just an excellent, excellent, excellent street education and fitness, because it was all based on results, not like
Yeah.
theory.
Right, right. Yeah. And did you have to seek out like because you said you mentioned, and again, any questions that get too close to the anon thing, you just tell me to back off. But did you have to seek out the coaching? Because you could find really great coaches. You mentioned you're coached by some of the best, and you and I have talked privately about this. But did you have to seek it out, or did this kind of happen by proximity? I mean, how did you come across some of that really great coaching experience that you got?
I sought it. There was only, at the time, and it's kind of funny, I saw a video on YouTube. It was clips from a podcast. And to this point, I'd never actually heard of the guy. And a little bit of background in this, I had learned about this high intensity, lower volume training called DC training, and I tried it out, and it changed everything in the gym. It
I
was like
think I think the viewers would like to know what DC stands for.
dog crap, which is dude made the name as like a troll, and then ended up becoming one of the greatest bodybuilding minds of all time. But I tried it out, and I was like a super high volume dude. Like I was doing like 5 sets of 10, 15, 5 exercises per body part and all this crazy stuff. And then I tried this because I kind of like was stalling, and I tried this, and it was like newbie gains again. It was incredible. So around the time I'm starting to do this, I'm watching this podcast, and I always lifted with like this intensity. I can take myself to this place and really put in some work, a dark place. And there's this guy, and he's just this. I love the guy. He's just kind of this like not grimy, this hardcore looking British dude, or maybe he's Scottish. Sorry, I might be fucking this up. But his name's Jordan Peters, and he's talking about like it was just a clip from the podcast about getting to this crazy dark place and attacking the sets with everything they have. And he was like just going into detail. He's like, yeah, it's not a good place I go into in my mind, but that's what it takes, for me to bring this intensity on. And I could relate to that. And I was like, okay, who is this guy? Never heard of him, honestly. And then I quickly figured out who Jordan Peters was. And he is one of the greatest, again, one of the greatest bodybuilding minds. So when it came to coaching, there was only one person in my mind at the time that I was like, there's only one person I want to go with. So um, went through him and then some of the coaches within his network. And yeah, that just from just not even just my own physique, but to my knowledge, just exploded. We're talking exponential compounding gains on knowledge. So that's I sought it. There was because I set in my mind there's only one person I wanted to work with, and that was who it was. And yeah, I mean, I'm guessing I made the right decision based on how things have ended up.
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to talking with you about Jordan Peters, and we can get to that maybe in the future. But that's a whole. It's such an interesting topic, the sort of lineage, because a lot of these bodybuilders that they are sort of the proteges of proteges of proteges, and Jordan Peters comes from, like you said, this high intensity camp, and there's so much to dig into with that. And it's really interesting stuff, and it's funny because you and I, uh, we have you kind of alluded to this already, where we've arrived kind of in similar places with how our outlook on training, like very similar, but we arrive from different places. And I did not arrive there from the high intensity camp, and I wouldn't even say that I arrived there from any camp really, but what's very interesting about like the Peters thing is it's so particular. it is a very particular thing. It's a very systematic, particular uh, perspective on training, and it speaks to some people, and for other people it just doesn't seem to speak to them. And you've already touched on this, and I think it really has to do with people who have access to that uh, ability to go to that dark place like you described, which is why it's such a badass like approach, and why even when I want to disagree with like some of the perspectives, it's like I can't allow myself to go there because I respect it so much, and I think it's such a cool place that training philosophy has come from. So it's very reluctant that I sometimes do disagree, but yeah, that's very interesting that that was your route, and it definitely says a lot about your approach. And if you follow Ox on Twitter and on his Substack, I mean, if you pay very close attention, you could tell that he's very influenced by this guy, by Jordan Peters and even his priors,
Dante,
in the
good
best
old
way.
Dante.
Dante, right, exactly. And-
We
yeah,
kind of just naturally, like we were joking before we started this, like, okay, this first episode, how are we going to transition from, our intro and explaining who we are, then into the topic of our first episode? And we've actually naturally gotten
I knew
here,
this was going to happen.
which is why what you do works, and what me and Mikey's outlooks and philosophy at the end of the day are. We take different methods, but we reach the same conclusion. And the big overarching topic of what makes something work in fitness is this principle of progressive overload and what that entails. And you don't even have to look at it through this traditional definition of progressive overload, which essentially progressive overload means that you are progressively over time adding more stimulus. You're adding more reps, you are adding more weight, you're adding, it can be more volume, more, you're just adding more, you're getting better at the exercise. And that for any discipline within fitness, whether you want to be a good endurance guy, you want to be a strong guy, you want to be a big guy, anything, the overarching principle, and this is why first episode where this is the theme of it, is because this principle of getting better, progressive overload, as another fitness coach has said, regardless of how you feel about them, work out harder than the last time, which is the overarching theme of fitness. Because then again, we can now bring back our backgrounds. We have a high level wrestler, we have a Army special operations guy, now both bodybuilders and just general fitness enthusiast. And the main theme that everything always falls back on is to progress in any type of fitness endeavor, you need to progressively make it harder, progressively add to it, and progressively get better. And that's where, in which will probably be, I think we said it'll be next episode or maybe coming up, will be like you have the arguments of volume versus intensity, which has been for whatever reason just this contention point. But you can arrive there multiple ways. You can go high intensity, low volume. You can go lower intensity, higher volume. It's at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. All that matters is, are you progressing? And so that's really like full stop what fitness to a degree, or well, progressing in fitness. I mean, it's even in the name, progressive overload. That's really what it's all about.
Yeah, and what's funny is that people have applied this concept. It's a very simple concept. Like you've laid it out. It's very simple, but it's funny that when people adopt the frameworks that produce this concept of progressive overload in their training, it's funny because it's this thing that they can apply to other parts of their lives. And I'm sure you've done this with your writing and stuff like that, and other things that you want to get better at, even like endurance training and all that. So it is one of these really fundamental principles that kind of, at the end of the day, you can argue about 10, 20 different nuances that can drive you crazy. You could have disagreements on all these niche topics, but at the end of the day, I think everybody agrees on this thing, which is why it's like such a great place to start. Everybody agrees that the basis of improvement comes from the the progressively, I hate to use the same like terminology to describe the word, but it comes from this improving on your last time's performance. And so I mean, what would you said, because you mentioned actually something that I think might need to be fleshed out maybe a little bit, and you mentioned it could be sets, it could be weight, and then you said something that I don't know if you meant to say, because it is one of these things that people go crazy over. And I agree with what you said, but you said you can improve in volume as well. People, they have a I've seen people thrown into a tizzy over this, like this idea that you can progressively overload volume. I totally agree with you. I call it volume ramping and I use it in my own programs. But people will have full on Twitter battles over this topic. They're wrong, by the way.
Yeah, I was
But
about to say they're
yeah,
objectively wrong.
yeah,
You can argue what's optimal and what's science based and all this, which fine, cool. I just don't care about what is optimal or what's science based. Like, sure, I am going to try within my own lifestyle, my own way I like to train, and all of that, and with efficiency and all that. I want to be optimal, but it's got to be optimal in the way that it's practical to me. So, but that's not, there's some people like when we talk about intensity, they can't bring it like that. And Dante Trudel just
that's so
had
true.
the best post I've ever seen on this, pretty much full stop. And
Do you
like
remember?
some
Do you remember
people,
it?
the post, yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course. I have a
yeah.
photographic memory, you know this. But basically, he was talking about how some people cannot bring that intensity, or it just takes them a while, warm up sets and sets to get to the, these like all out effort sets and all that. So if you just can't do that, like you're not going to be able to bring the intensity. So yeah, you need volume. It's just it is another method to do it. Maybe there's a better way on paper and science that says that like, oh, we're going to use the lowest volume, highest intensity and all that. And I definitely see merits to that. And like I come from a higher intensity background. But that is not the only answer. It's not the right answer, and context dependent. It is not the optimal answer. So it's very funny that these arguments come up, and what it completely negates is literally the most important principle of all of this, and that is, can you push more weight than you did last workout? Can you get more reps than you did last workout? Are you doing more work than you did last workout? And then you tie that in with recovery. So can you are you doing enough stimulus to trigger that growth response? If we're talking hypertrophy, muscle growth context, are you doing enough stimulus? And you don't need that much stimulus. The amount of stimulus you need is kind of dependent on intensity. If you can do one straight set to absolute failure and just crush it, that can be enough for you. Or you can't. So you need a few sets, but it's fine. It doesn't matter. You just need enough stimulus, and then you need enough recovery to recover from that stimulus so that you can progressively overload, so that you challenge the muscle, stimulus happens, you recover. Once you recover from that stimulus, now your body, there's different laws like law of supercompensation and things like that, that now your body is like, okay, cool, we now can push more weight, because it actually comes down to like a evolutionary survival instinct. And that is that if you, let's just use an example, and I'll go like a high intensity example here. Let's say you get 10 reps, 225 incline bench, just use that off the top.
Hmm.
And you get rep 10, you go to failure. Well, what the body thinks is, oh crap, we just got this stressor, this load placed on us, and to survive, it doesn't know you're in the gym with a spotter in a controlled setting. It's like, okay, to survive, we need to be able to do this, and we need to be able to overcome this. So then you do the workout, one set, whatever you're going to do, you hit failure, and then you
Hmm.
recover over time. Eventually, with the right, make sure you're eating enough protein and all that, you will then the next workout be better at doing that. Maybe you get 10 reps again, but that last rep went up faster. And then
Right.
eventually, and it might even be the next workout, eventually you get 11 reps. Well, you just did more, you progressively overloaded. And for a muscle to progressively overload, there are aspects of strength that is like neurological and all that. It's just getting better at doing the lift. But then for a muscle to be able to adapt to that strength, to those reps, it also has to grow. A bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. It has more strength potential. So that's where
Hmm.
growth comes from. That is essentially hypertrophy 101 is the muscle will now grow to adapt an adaptive response to
Hmm.
now be able to handle that load and more load in the future. And it's
Right.
it's quite a simple concept, but where people just get their panties in a bunch is how do we get to this? And it kind of comes down to it doesn't matter as long as you get to it. Like
Right.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter as long as you get to that point.
Right. Do you should we go into the whole intensity volume conversation?
Uh,
Should we go deep into that or what?
I want to really devote an episode
Okay.
to that.
Okay.
But I mean, of course,
I'll do just a brief just a brief like overview of this, which is that you know just that there's this idea. Well, actually, you're right. I think we should save it for next time because I can't do it in a way that I think could just be condensed enough to make enough sense. Maybe we'll get into it another time. But
we'll need to go into the weeds on it
yeah,
a little bit
yeah,
because it's a complicated and it's complicated, but it's all simple at the end of the day because at the end of the day
it
you
is.
have to refer back to progressive overload. Um,
That's right.
but there's so many nuances to it, and the issue that I see on social media is that it gets very dogmatic, and there's only one way to do this, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And this is the theme of everything I try to talk about, you as well, but just speaking for myself here, is that there are certain parameters and there's certain principles that allow you to grow, and there's certain like boxes you need to check, and as long as those boxes get checked, how you check those boxes don't really matter because it's really just a matter of challenging the muscle, then fueling the muscle with proper nutrition, and
Hmm.
then allowing the muscle to actually recover.
Right.
Do
Right.
that. Cool. I mean, there's other things, and we'll get into like the said principles, specific adaptation to imposed demands, which essentially is just a fancy way of saying, like, if you want to grow muscle, there are certain parameters that make hypertrophy, or that's just the science name for muscle growth, that make it possible. So it's like, without getting into the weeds on that, it's like the load you need to be lifting, the weight needs to be 30 to 80% of your one rep max. That's about where it happens best. And relative intensity, you need to be within 5 reps to failure, to be able to really challenge the muscle to grow. And then other specific nuances, like we see better growth with like 2 to 5 minutes rest period because it allows you to kind of recover between the set and then push again at close to peak performance so that you're actually challenging the muscle in a meaningful way, yada, yada, yada. Which does not mean, I mean, honestly, you can lift a greater than 80% one rep max and you'll still see growth. It's just that's where we're starting to get into the land of optimal. But to a degree, you need optimal is a funny word because you need to be optimal to a degree. And I actually have a Substack post going out on this week. And it's that things like protein intake, like optimal protein intake would be zero point 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, you can, or lean body weight, to grow. So that's something where optimal matters quite a bit. It's like, okay, you need to be optimal there.
Yeah.
Where it can start to lose its meaning when we start talking about like well, it's optimal to train with this amount of volume and this intensity, blah, blah, because it loses all context.
Yeah.
So there's not
Yeah, yeah,
really a
yeah.
clear cut answer on that.
Yeah. I always thought that it was so funny that people that there was this directly inverse relationship between intensity and volume. I know we said we weren't going to get too deep into this, but this is as far as I'm going to go with it. It seems to be like I don't and I don't ever accuse you of doing this, but there are people who think that like it's this direct and maybe you disagree with me, but there is a direct inverse relationship that like your only choices are high intensity low volume or low intensity high volume. And I always make the argument that you could actually do high intensity, I wouldn't say high volume, but you could do more than low volume, and that number actually is higher than people think it is in terms of volume. I mean, like in terms of number of sets people could do per week at what, is considered a quality set. Now, do you agree with that, or do you have like some disagreements with that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's nuance here. And like the nuance I'd bring up is like we can get to efficiency. Um, because this is actually kind of something we talk about is well, we talk about all the time on the phone, is that even with my programming, I am on the load set, back off set, just two total working sets. So load set would mean that's like a heavier weight for, we'll call it 6 to 9 reps. Hit that to failure, near failure in the way I train. And then you would back off. You would take off, 25, 30% of the weight. And then you'd shoot for, 12 to 15 reps to failure. And I say this all the time. It's like, was the one load set, was that heavy enough? Was that enough to grow? And probably, yeah, sure. Like, and there's a lot of data on that, sure. But then there's also data on like subsequent sets where, okay, subsequent sets, you see even better growth. But all intents and purposes, probably that only one of those sets you needed to grow. But I like to be overly redundant in the sense of, okay, I can do this second set. I can, again, potentially enhance the amount of muscle growth, but I'm not worried that I did too much because it's still, we're nowhere
Yeah,
near where people are like, oh, overtraining, whatever. We're
unbelievable.
nowhere
Yeah,
near that. We're so far
that
away from that.
that has been such a thorn in my side as I've watched, like, Twitter, like people on Twitter, for example, this constant using the term overtraining to describe, like, doing more than like the bare minimum. It's unbelievable how common it is that people are falling into this sort of way of thinking. It's like the idea that you would, first of all, I don't even know their definition of overtraining, but definitionally we've yet to discover a high enough set range per week that causes what we associate overtraining to cause. So for example, and I know that studies are, just one data point, but have been, as far as 52 total sets per week, and I'm talking about two failure sets per week for using squats and leg presses and whatnot, um, for leg training per week. 52 total sets. This group didn't experience what we expected to experience with, and these were young people, college age people who had at least 3 years of training behind them, and they could squat 3 plates. So these were not like, untrained, you know college or like, untrained 60-year-olds or whatever. We're talking about people who could, squat 3 plates, 20, roughly 25 years old. And they ran this study, and they had these 3 groups. They had one group that did 22 sets per week, one group that did 32, and then one group that did 52. But the 32 and the 52, they progressed to that number. They all started at 22. Now 22 is high.
That's
That's
double what I
already
do. That's
right.
per muscle.
22 is
That's
already
double
really
what I
fucking
do.
high. And the and 52 sounds absurd. And I would never in a million years ever recommend anybody do 52
It's
sets or build up to
insane.
52 sets. It's insane.
That's like German volume training, like
Yeah,
every fucking day. Like that's
right.
insane.
And all of this really is to say, if these 52 set per week people aren't overtraining, and what I mean by overtraining is now they're experiencing detrimental effects of their training. In other words, the results came back that they still progressed at a nearly negligible, but still on average a greater progression than the 32 per week. and the 32 per week progressed more than the 22 per week. Not by a ton, and in some cases you could say maybe negligible. Okay, fair, but they didn't experience what people expected them to experience, which is like negative return, not, actually, yeah, negative returns didn't happen. So, okay, it's one study, whatever, but it is it's such a monumental study, and it just came out recently, and we promise, at least I promise, I'm not going to be Mr. Check out this study guy. I'm actually, I'm actually going to be fairly conversational in how we talk about this stuff. But I thought that was so fascinating that like this study actually showed this,
It,
and and I still see people saying things like any more than like like some very low number of sets, and you risk overtraining, and then you get like you'll start losing muscle. It's like, oh my god, like it's like
it's
you
ridiculous.
need to update your software there, bud.
And it brings me back to the point I was making, and that's where, like I said, that one set, that one load set on that one exercise, that was probably enough. But the body's extremely resilient. So you think that second back off set to failure, you think that's what's pushing my body to overtraining? And then you
Unbelievable.
like
Yeah.
it's no, like I could do five, as this study shows, I could do 5 times that a week. So I, for the people that are low volume absolutists, it's like, fine, I'm going to be a little bit more redundant. I'm going to do 2 sets per exercise. And so I know, cool, I know one was probably enough, but now I know two is for sure enough. And it's not like I'm going to dip into these recovery capabilities where it's like, oh, I can't recover, because you can get away with so much more work. And that's where it comes down to. It's the body is just so resilient. And
Hmm.
you just have to, and then it really comes down to, you just have to really, the one thing I don't like about studies is they're a set time period, some 12, 16, 20 weeks, where
Right.
to really
Yeah.
get the big picture of training, we need to be talking years, years. And that's where like some of my arguments will come in where, okay, do enough to grow, like a little bit more than enough to grow, but not more, because you're going to stay fresh. You're going to be good. But
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're doing proper deloads, proper auto regulation of your volume and all that, at the end of the day, there's so many vehicles. It's
Yeah.
like literally driving on the road. You don't necessarily to get drive 10 miles down the road. You don't need a Ferrari. You can be in a little Prius. You're still going to get there. And depending on the
Who's
amount of
going to get the furthest,
stoplights, yeah.
right?
But it's even
Yeah.
depending on the amount of stoplights and the flow of traffic and everything. Honestly, that Ferrari and that Prius might get there at the same time. Those, stop
Yeah.
theoretical, metaphorical stoplights being, when you need to take deloads, when you need to,
Yeah.
down regulate volume a little bit, blah, blah, blah. Like at the end of the day, it's kind of like driving in traffic. It's been
Yeah.
good,
It's
dude.
yeah.
I was excited for this post. Um, we have. I'm actually impressed with. I was so nervous going into this that this is actually. This is way better than I thought. But this is literally every single one of our phone calls. like
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Exactly.
I've
That's why it'd be crazy not to like record them. It might as well put it out there for people to listen to if they're curious.
yeah. I think without us being over redundant here, we're about 45 minutes in. I think we've really hammered this point of it really doesn't matter exactly what you do as long as your workouts get better. You move more weight, you do more in the gym, and you can adapt to it. You grow. And you know what that works with? That works with running. That works with rucking. That works with
Writing.
riding. It works with
even
strength
yeah.
training.
Right.
It
Yeah.
works with hypertrophy. It works with freaking CrossFit. And it's even funnier, that works with life. And
Yeah.
that's something we'll definitely get into is that bodybuilding, oh, excuse me, nice burp. Bodybuilding is, and just fitness in general, the principles that allow you to be successful in bodybuilding are the same principles that largely allow you to be successful in life. And it's I kind of had a tweet the other day that was about like, people that are obsessed with like self-help books and just
Hmm.
consuming all the time. And it's kind of funny because like something as simple as bodybuilding in a very real way, in a real world application and results way, will teach you these valuable principles and life lessons.
Yeah.
And bodybuilding, fitness in general is very it's living philosophy.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
very very
I can't wait to get into like, maybe an episode where we go into like actually Menser's whole philosophy side. Maybe not his training. We'll get into his training eventually too, but I can't wait to get into his like whole philosophy stuff. That's where I think he's like his best.
it's funny you bring him up. It is really 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 like Mike Menser. Learned a bunch from him. I think he's brilliant, but almost when I see Menser now, it's almost a bad taste in my mouth with almost how bastardized um, they've kind of made his work. And I'll have people that will, in me, like, this compared to many, many, many trainers and coaches, my volume's pretty low. But these Menserites will make it seem like I am extreme high volume. I'm like, dude, like, no, you don't understand. Like on Twitter, largely a couple of years ago, I was like almost one of the voices for low volume. And now it's like I am this junk volume. And
Yeah, you're middle of the road now.
it comes back to why we've done this podcast is that there's not a lot of this nuance. There's not a lot of this, you have a guy who I am admittedly a lower volume guy that can actually acknowledge that there's applications and places where high, not just higher, but even high volume works as
Yeah.
long as you're, taking those boxes for muscle growth. So
It would, and some people just respond better to it. I think too. I think there are some people who respond better to lower, and then there's some people who respond better to higher. And there might be a million and one reasons for why it works out per
genetics,
person.
man.
We can get into that. Genetics, even mindset. Like because I think if we're talking about like the sort of the lineage of the high intensity people, and ending most recently with Jordan Peters, and now being continued on by BowTiedOx. Um,
I wish I could. I wish I was influential enough to be in that sentence.
yeah, well, we'll see. But these guys, I think that there's a personality type actually that is drawn to that, and
That YouTube video I saw that one
yeah,
time of those podcast clips. That's you're to a T. You're correct. Like it was
yeah,
my personality lines up with the way this guy trains, and lo
yeah.
and behold, my personality lined up with the methodology. I worked to my strengths, and what happened? I got pretty big, bro.
That's why I think that's why. First of all, not kissing your ass here. We've been friends too long for that to even be a thing. But you know, um, that's why I think people are drawn to you, and even why I appreciate, because I wouldn't be a Jordan Peters guy. I'll be sure. I think you might have already guessed that. I'm not really a low volume. I'm not an intensity guy. I am an intensity guy, but I'm not a low volume, high intensity guy personally. Although I really, really, really respect it, and that's why I really respect you, because I think it's actually badass if you could make it work. I think it's almost a boast if you could say you're a low volume guy, because it's like it's a it really is. People think they lift into to failure. I always question it. If somebody tells me, "Oh yeah, all my shit's to failure," I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure, you lift to failure."
You've seen some of
Like,
my videos. Like
yeah,
it's
I mean,
blood
but
and
I also know
guts.
your personality too. I know you're nuts in the best way.
That's what I was going to say. You're
Yeah,
complimenting me and saying it's a boast. And I was like, I don't know how much my mental illness is a boast. And you kind of bring up a funny point is that you're not a low volume, high intensity
no,
guy, but isn't it crazy that I'm coaching you and we work together and somehow it still works? Almost
it
like we
still
can do
works.
this multiple different ways.
Almost. Don't tell anybody.
So I
Yeah. I
guess like
think I think I'm a Jay Cutler guy.
I do like Jay
No, and
Cutler.
nobody says that, do they? Like nobody,
No, dude, no one says that.
nobody says that. And I think I really do. If I really truly analyze my training, no, I wouldn't actually say I'm a, I wouldn't say that. because I think he did really high, like, set numbers. I don't do that. I actually train similar to you, but I think I enjoy volume ramping. Anyway, these are nuances, but the point is I am more on the medium to high volume side of things for
And
sure. Yeah.
it's again, it doesn't matter how,
Yeah.
as long as the work's being put in, you're recovering and all that. So I think
Yeah.
we're at a good point here.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about some future plans. So for
Yeah.
me, I know that we were going to work on it tonight, probably going to end up working on it tomorrow, but very soon within the upcoming weeks. The goal is by New Year's. So we got a another BowTiedOx program coming out, and there's a little change this time. Instead of it being, written format or a really, 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 really bad design push pull blanks 12-week program, we've got Mikey in the studio who is helping with the design. So you already know it's going to be extremely well designed, which will be no credit to my own. And yeah, that's going to be dropping soon. It's going to be week by week dropping the program and all that. I'm so excited about that. That's going to be, I think that's really, my Substack's always going to be written content and stuff like that. But I think what's going to start taking over the appeal of the Substack is going to be that I plan on at all times having a weekly or a program going on, a 12-week or so program being released every week, the workouts of the week. So I think that's going to be what my Substack ends up kind of being. As much as I can nerd out and spend 12 hours writing an article, people are just gonna be like, "Hey man, when's the next program?" But
Yeah, that's it's similar to what I've got going on as well. Yeah, so I right now we're on week 12 of my program, Hyperion, but the idea is right now putting we're going to continue to do that and look forward to more stuff in that world. But also we just dropped the sort of a daily vlog on my YouTube channel. And if you haven't really checked it out yet, it's at Gain Trust. So it's
it's awesome
youtube.com at
too.
Gain Trust,
Yeah.
and it just follows my training with my training partner who was a high school friend of mine, and we kept in touch all these years. And he's an entrepreneur. He has his own hot sauce company that was on that show Hot Ones. It's called Sauce Bay. It's really freaking good. It's directed at like people in the fitness world, and he's got his own raw honey line now, and he's got a lot of really cool stuff coming out. And it's so
I
in the
can't
future. So yeah,
I can't
yeah,
wait till we're big enough and we're like, this episode is brought to you by Sauce Bay.
by
And we can
Sauce
do,
Bay.
the podcaster thing where we do 10 minutes of advertisement intros. I'm
Yeah,
just kidding. Maybe
hell
I'm
yeah.
kidding. I don't know.
Hell yeah,
No.
I'd take the ad revenue for
But
sure.
something that I'd like to point out is that um, I'm really good for a lot of like people that learn by reading because I'm a decent writer and all that. But Mikey, if you're a visual guy, you need to check out his work. He from the videos, the graphics, and all that. His digital game is rather absurd. It's pretty good. So
Appreciate it.
be
Thank
sure
you.
to check that out. And I guess, yeah, be ready for a large post coming out on calories in and calories out. The truth on that, because it's getting weird. It's getting weird. It's getting weird. And then yeah, like I said, I've got another post that's going to be coming out on what did I say it was about? Oh Lord.
No, it was on it was on optimal, meaningful
Oh,
optimization.
meaningful optimization. Yes, yes, yes. That's right. So I don't know. I ain't got much left to say other than we have a lot more episodes coming out. We're kind of gonna tier structure it in like a it makes no sense. I said like an octopus. We'll have it'll be like chapters. So it'll be like, okay, the main point of this, starting with progressive overload, then we'll get into volume, exercise selection, other overarching points of this, and then we'll move on to a new lesson. And it'll be like the mental benefits and how to leverage those of so it's going to be we really want this to be an entertaining somewhat of a like I don't know how would you
ADHD.
describe it. ADHD, but like a each episode's building on the other episodes and you're going to come away with a bigger picture and understanding of the fitness world. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think we have if I do say so myself, a really good structure we're going to have going forward with these. So they're
Yeah.
probably going to be weekly. We don't know. We're artists. We put these out when we can. But
Yeah.
hopefully you enjoyed this.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. This was great.
This was awesome. I don't know how to end these things, so I'm just gonna kind of say like, yeah, thanks for thanks for listening, and watch out for next time.
Okay.
All righty.
Uh,
Well, you
uh,
guys
Do you
just
not know how to do it, really?
no, no. I was gonna just end it and be
Uh,
like, so with that said, in gains we trust.
In gains we trust. Let's go.